It was an early January afternoon, cold and quiet. The town of Conyers, Georgia, wrapped itself in the kind of stillness only winter can bring. Narrow streets, old-fashioned houses, and the occasional curl of chimney smoke rising into the gray sky. Just 20 miles east of downtown Atlanta, this was a place where people still believed that evil rarely knocked on their doors. But that belief shattered with a scream. Two teenage girls, hair disheveled, eyes wild with panic, rushed into the street and slammed their fists on a police cruiser. Their voices broke through the silence like shattered glass. Our mom is dead." Officers responded immediately. The address led to a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. But behind its front door was a scene no one could ever be prepared for. Nikki Whitehead, 34 years old, was found in the bathtub. Her body was submerged in water, stained red with blood. Her torso, her limbs, all covered in stab wounds. Not one, not 10, but 80. 80 stab wounds. 80 brutal strikes against a defenseless woman with no weapon, no escape. The scene screamed rage. This wasn't a quiet murder, it was an explosion of violence. Furniture overturned, blood sprayed across walls and doorframes, broken objects everywhere. A fight had taken place, a desperate one. Nikki had fought back. She fought with everything she had, until her body gave out. Even seasoned officers were shaken. One would later say, "We used to think this town was safe. But that day I realized even the quietest places can hide bloody secrets." Nikki was a single mother. A woman who had fought through a rough youth to rebuild her life from scratch. She worked as a hairstylist and was studying fashion, dreaming of opening her own salon. But more than anything else, Nikki's life revolved around two people. Her twin daughters, Jasmia and Tasmia. At 16, the twins were her pride and her burden. Nikki once told friends, "I love my girls more than anything, but I can't control them anymore." To the outside world, the girls were beautiful, smart, and charming, both popular cheerleaders in high school. But beneath the surface was something darker. Resentment, tension, and a history of bitter conflict with the woman who gave them life. Nikki's life wasn't simple. For years, her daughters had been raised by their great-grandmother, Della Fraser. But Nikki wanted them back. She wanted a second chance at being the mother she'd once failed to be. A court order changed everything. The twins were forced to leave the freedom they had with their great-grandmother and return to live with the mother they barely knew. And just a few weeks later, Nikki was dead. Detectives started from zero. There were no witnesses, no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no tampered locks. Whoever did this had been let in or had a key. The deeper investigators dug, the more they realized. Every clue pointed back to the final 24 hours of Nikki Whitehead's life. A mother, savagely murdered. Two daughters, the first to find her body. A town left in shock. And a chilling question echoed through the minds of everyone involved. Who could unleash that kind of hatred? 80 stab wounds. No forced entry. The twins discovered the body. A murder that shook America. Every year, thousands of murders happen across the country, but some send a deeper chill. Not just because of the brutality, but because the killer turns out to be someone no one ever suspected. And her twin daughters, Jasmia and Tasmia, once known as the sweet little angels. This is the story of Nikki Whitehead. But behind their innocent smiles, what truth was hiding? After the emergency call, when officers arrived at the scene, they were met with a sight that left even the most seasoned among them stunned. Twin girls, Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead, sat in the back of a police vehicle, huddled together, sobbing uncontrollably. The image, two pretty teenage girls, tear-streaked, clinging to each other, seemed to fit the portrait of daughters who had just lost their mother. Officer Jackie Dunn, who responded directly to the scene, later recalled, "We approached them very gently. They were just kids, and those kids had just witnessed something horrifying." Police began taking the initial statements. Both sisters told the exact same story, clean, structured, with no suspicious inconsistencies, but a little too perfect. According to their statements, the night before the murder, Nikki, their mother, came home late. She'd gone to a party, didn't say where or with whom. The twins claimed they'd already gone to bed and had no interaction with their mother that night. The next morning, around 7 a.m., they got up to get ready for school. They knocked on their mother's bedroom door to say goodbye, but there was no answer. The door remained shut. No one spoke. No sound came from inside the room. Nothing seemed unusual, at least according to them. Assuming she was still asleep or tired from the night before, they decided not to disturb her. Both girls left the house for school. That afternoon, upon returning home, they discovered a horrifying scene: their mother's body submerged in the bathtub, blood everywhere. To investigators, the girl's story, though emotional, felt off. Detective Ken Swift, a veteran of more than 40 homicide cases, noted, "I've seen a lot of kids lose parents. Some are too shocked to speak, some wail, some go totally numb. But these girls, they cried like actors. And their story? It sounded rehearsed." Officers began scrutinizing the details more closely. There were no signs of forced entry. The front door was opened with a key. No broken locks, no shattered windows. That almost ruled out an outside intruder. The killer was likely someone the victim knew, someone who lived in the house. Police temporarily ruled out the possibility of an outside assailant. Attention gradually shifted toward the two daughters, the ones who first found the body. The small home where Nikki lived with her daughters was now fully sealed off. Inside, it offered clear evidence of a violent struggle. Blood was found on the doorknob, on the walls, trailing from the bedroom to the bathroom. A couch had been overturned. One leg snapped, makeup scattered across the floor. But there were no signs of a rushed search. This wasn't a robbery. Everything pointed to a physical altercation, beginning in the living room, then moving toward the bathroom. Strangely, there were no blood traces on the staircase, hallway, or entry, areas the killer would have had to cross if they'd left the house after the crime. When reconstructing Nikki's path through the house, investigators realized she had fought hard. She tried to flee. Blood on the front doorknob showed Nikki attempted to open it. But the door had been locked from the inside. The victim was trapped in her own home. That raised a chilling question. Who was inside with her at the time? And who had the means to lock the door after committing murder? In a parallel development, detectives continued to question the girls. They asked about Nikki's relationships with men in her life: boyfriends, relatives, co-workers. The names Robert and Joe came up. Both had recently dated Nikki. The twins said their mother often argued with them, especially Joe, who'd reportedly yelled at Nikki the night before she died. One of the girls whispered. She was yelling into the phone, telling Joe not to come over anymore. She was screaming loud. This immediately caught police attention. Could this be a crime of passion, jealousy, a lover's quarrel turned fatal? Police widened their investigation. One by one, they tracked down every man connected to Nikki. Robert, who worked as a long-haul trucker, was ruled out thanks to GPS data showing he was miles away at the time. Joe, a barber, was confirmed to have argued with Nikki the night before. But he also had a solid alibi. He was at work, witnessed by several co-workers. As the circle of suspects shrank, detectives once again turned their eyes toward the twins, the only people confirmed to be inside the home that morning. Then came a small but critical detail: the school's surveillance footage. The twins had claimed they left home around 7:30 a.m. and arrived at school by 7:45, just slightly late. But the footage showed them walking through the school gates at 10:15 a.m., almost 3 hours later than they said. Why lie? What were they doing during that missing window of time from 7 to 10 a.m.? When asked again, the girls looked away. No more tears, just silence. The gaps in their story began to widen. The puzzle pieces no longer fit. Officer Jackie Dunn said in a later press conference, "At first, I thought they were just traumatized kids. But the more I watched them, the more I felt chilled. Something was very, very wrong." As their statements began to fall apart and no physical evidence supported their version of events, the investigators knew. Words were no longer enough. They had to find proof. And that proof, soon to be revealed, would lead to a truth almost no one was ready to believe. The death of Nikki Whitehead may not have been caused by a boyfriend, not by a stranger, but possibly by her own flesh and blood. Her twin daughters. The investigation began to shift direction. What initially appeared to be sympathy from police toward the twins was slowly replaced by quiet, growing suspicion. And it didn't come from instinct. It came from facts that could no longer be denied. The first piece of evidence came from the school's surveillance camera. Jasmia and Tasmia insisted they had arrived at school around 7:45 a.m., just a few minutes late, they said, because they missed the bus. But the footage revealed a completely different story. The twins were only seen arriving at the school gates at 10:15 a.m., almost 3 hours late. So where were they during that missing period of time? Where did they go? Who could verify their whereabouts? No one. They had completely vanished from the radar, except for one place, the scene of the murder. Police returned to the crime scene, combing over every detail as if navigating a cold-blooded maze. They discovered something crucial. There was no indication Nikki had been attacked in her sleep or ambushed from behind. Instead, the scene showed clear signs of a violent struggle, beginning in the bedroom, moving through the living room, and ending at the bathtub. Nikki had fought back. Blood trails were found along the floor and on the doorknob, proof she had tried to escape, tried to reach the front door. But it was locked. It took several minutes of struggling, grappling, and desperate resistance before she finally collapsed. That could only have happened if the attacker was very close. Close enough to control the space, lock the door, and attempt to clean up afterward. Detectives returned to the interrogation room. This time they separated the sisters. 2 girls, 1 story. But without sitting side by side, cracks began to form. One said, "We walked to school." The other said, "I think we took the bus." One said, "Mom's door was slightly open." The other said, "It was closed and no one dared to touch it." This was no longer coincidence. These were serious contradictions in their statements. The questioning strategy changed, from gentle to relentless. Detectives began cutting in, challenging, trapping. "Are you sure? Why is your story different from your sister's? How come you can't remember the morning your mom died?" Tension mounted. Sweat beaded. Voices began to stammer. We had suspected ex-boyfriends. We even considered great-grandma Della, but the deeper we dug, the clearer it became. Only 2 people had the opportunity, the motive, and the means to commit this crime. And that was the victim's own daughters. During a search of the twins' bedroom, police discovered a diary. Not one book, but several torn pages, filled with anger, resentment, and thoughts of leaving or destroying their mother. One line chilled investigators to the bone. "If we have to go back to living with her, we better do it soon." At 16, no one thought those words would foreshadow a real-life crime. Then came the biggest turning point. Forensic results revealed a strand of hair lodged between the victim's teeth. DNA analysis confirmed it wasn't Nikki's hair. It belonged to one of her daughters. The discovery was stunning. In her final moments, Nikki had bitten her daughter in one last desperate act of self-defense. Thanks to Nikki's unique dental pattern, a small gap between her 2 front teeth, a forensic dentist was able to match the bite mark to the injury on one of the girls with near certainty. The bite mark, tiny, brutal, became the final nail in the coffin. A long and savage fight between a single mother and the 2 daughters she had once fought to win back through the courts. In fact, this wasn't the first time Nikki had been attacked by her children. 2 years earlier, Nikki had dialed 911. When officers arrived, she ran out of the house, scratches on her neck, hands trembling. Through tears, she screamed, "My girls hit me. They hate me. They want to leave this house." Back then, the incident was handled as a domestic dispute. The girls were sent to live with their great-grandmother. No one realized. The next time, Nikki wouldn't live to make another call. The motive was becoming clearer. Not money, not jealousy, but pure, unfiltered freedom. The twins had grown up with their great-grandmother. No curfews, no discipline. Being forced to move back in with Nikki meant strict rules. No parties, limited internet, no dating. Nikki didn't want her girls repeating her mistakes, getting pregnant at 17, living paycheck to paycheck, struggling alone. But what Nikki didn't know was that her rules had pushed her daughters to their absolute breaking point. Police reconstructed the full timeline. 6:45 a.m., Nikki argues with her daughters, yelling about curfews and a boyfriend. 7 to 7:30 a.m., the fight escalates. Nikki is beaten, stabbed repeatedly. 7:30 and 9 a.m., the girls clean up the scene, hide the weapon, wash off the blood. 10:15 a.m., they arrive at school, trying to appear normal. 3:30 p.m., they return home, pretend to discover the body, call 911. From grieving daughters to primary suspects, from victims to perpetrators. There was no turning back. The evidence was overwhelming. The mask had slipped. Now there was only one thing left for the police to do. Confront them, one last time. The investigation had reached its final turning point. The lies had been exposed. The tears that once seemed sympathetic no longer held meaning. Now the detectives held all the cards, and the final card was the forensic evidence. During the autopsy, the forensic examiner discovered a hair lodged between the victim's two front teeth. It was not normal. It wasn't Nikki's hair, and it certainly didn't get there by accident. After DNA testing, police confirmed it belonged to one of her twin daughters. That detail revealed a terrifying possibility. Nikki had bitten her own daughter while trying to fight back. To confirm this, forensic dentistry experts were brought in. Nikki had a rare dental trait, a small gap between her two front teeth. Combined with a bite mark on one of the girl's arms, the conclusion was clear. The victim had bitten her daughter in a final, desperate act of self-defense. Detective Ken Swift made the decision to bring the twins back in for questioning. This time, no more kindness, no more room to dodge. Laid out in front of them were the autopsy reports, crime scene photos, trace evidence analysis, diary pages, inconsistent statements, surveillance footage, and DNA. Everything. Undeniable. The twins no longer played the role of grieving daughters. Their eyes turned cold, hands clenched tightly together. No more tears on their faces. The detective stared straight at them and said, "Your mother fought to the end. She left a mark on the person who killed her. And now we know exactly who that was." For the first time, one of the girls broke her silence. "I can't take it anymore." From there, everything unraveled. A full, chilling confession, recorded on tape. That morning, the argument began like so many others. Nikki yelled at her daughters for staying out too late. They argued about curfews, about cell phones, about boyfriends. One of them screamed, "I hate you." Nikki reacted strongly, stepping toward her daughter with fire in her eyes. She had been a young mother, fierce, hot-tempered, unrelenting. The argument escalated into violence. One of the girls shoved her to the floor. Rage erupted. The twins jumped on their mother. Nikki struggled, scratched, tried to run to the door, but one of them had already locked it. Then one of them grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter. The first stab came down. I stabbed her in the neck, then the chest, the back, so many times. I lost count. She just kept screaming. Then she collapsed, not moving anymore. After committing the murder, the girls dragged their mother's body into the bathtub, turned on the water, cleaned up the blood, changed clothes, disposed of the weapon. Then, as if nothing had happened, they left for school. At 10:15 a.m., surveillance footage captured them walking through the school gate, bags neat, hair brushed, composed. After school, they returned home, stood in front of the door, took a deep breath, then screamed, our mom is dead." A perfect performance. If not for the evidence, if not for the hair, if not for the bite mark, if not for the truth. Police didn't need to ask any more questions. They had everything they needed. May 21st, 2010, Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead were arrested. Charge: first-degree murder. 16-year-old girls. Cold-blooded killers. They weren't there. Just before graduation, the twins were taken into custody. After a lengthy legal process, they pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter in a plea deal, receiving 30 years in prison each. No funeral, no apology, no final embrace between mother and daughter. Only death. And prison bars. In the most heartbreaking cases, the killer isn't a stranger. It's someone who shares your meals, someone who sleeps under the same roof, someone who calls you Mom. Nikki tried to redeem herself. She had been a lost teenager once, but rose to fight for her children. She loved them, protected them, gave everything for them. But sometimes, love isn't enough to stop children already slipping into darkness. After everything that happened, the two 16-year-old girls, once seen as sweet little angels, traded their freedom for a 30-year prison sentence. With that sentence, Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead will not walk free until they are nearly 50 years old. Their entire youth buried behind prison walls, all for one impulsive decision and a crime that could never be forgiven. Nikki Whitehead, the victim of this case, was not a perfect mother. She had made mistakes. She had lost her temper. She had allowed her children to grow up in separation, lacking the warmth of a complete, stable family. But she tried. She went back to school. She wanted a stable job. She poured every hope she had into the future of her twin daughters, the only people she ever truly loved. She wanted to start over, but society didn't give her enough time. In court, there were no tears from the defendants, no genuine apologies, just a plea of guilt under the terms of a legal agreement. Nikki's family was broken. Her mother, the woman who once fought for custody of the girls, now escorted them out of the courtroom in a silence that felt like death. Public opinion was divided. Some were furious, calling them teenage monsters. Others felt pity, seeing it as the tragedy of a family long starved of love. But justice doesn't operate on emotion, it requires truth, and the truth had been uncovered, through blood, tears, and unimaginable pain. On Detective Ken Swift's desk sat an old business card, Nikki's. Her eyes were printed on it, staring forward, deep and sad. He kept that card as a reminder, I may be the only one left who can speak for Nikki. The case of Nikki Whitehead was more than a heartbreaking story. It was a wake-up call. In the United States, hundreds of similar cases happen every year, where the killer isn't a stranger, but a son or daughter, a grandchild, someone raised in the arms of the victim. The legal system, the schools, the families, all must become sharper, faster, able to see the warning signs before it's too late. A mother who loved, who sacrificed, and who died at the hands of those she once considered her entire world. But if she could go back to that moment, would Nikki walk away? Certainly not, because she was a mother. And a mother, even knowing how it ends, always chooses her child. Justice was served, but the wounds left behind, for the family, the community, the investigators, will never fully heal. The case of Nikki Whitehead isn't just about a crime, it's about loss, about failure in parenting, and about the price of things left unsaid. In the end, it wasn't just the death of a mother, it was the death of a family.